So the thing that blew my mind about that was I was thinking, looking at it, reading through it, and I'm trying to imagine, like, what kind of ham-fisted scenario would you have to get in where you actually get charged with this? And it would have to be like, usually the way these things work, you're going to some kind of fundraiser, which is exactly what you would think. Politician gets up there and gives a speech, a bunch of people are hanging out and listen to it, then there's some campaign staffer that you go give checks to. And so realistically, to actually meet this, it would be like, I'm handing the check directly to the elected official, and I'm saying, I'm giving you this money so that you'll vote for that bill that previously you voted against. And he'd have to be like, yes, I'm taking this money, and I'm going to vote in a different way than I used to, and I'm doing it specifically because of this money. Let's go ahead and record this conversation so we have the explicit agreement here.
Wow.
And then you think about, okay, well, which of us is going to tell on ourselves? That's never going to happen. So somebody has to witness it, It's just like absurdly loose. And when I first read that, I was like, I must be reading this incorrectly. There's no way that that's how this actually works.
Yeah.
So that sent me down this crazy rabbit hole of just researching, like, where did bribery law come from? How did we get to where we are in Texas? And there's all kinds of fun stories associated with that.
And so you had mentioned, we spoke about this previously, and you had said that the current state of affairs can kind of be traced back to one singular incident.
Yeah. So there was a guy named Frank Sharp. Was like
that's a cool fucking name, man.
I know, he's got the name for it. But yeah, he had a bank, like a state bank that he ran, but also an insurance company. And so he was very prominent in the community. That's why it became known as Sharpstown. And basically what happened, this story's so absurd. So
how long ago was this? I'm sorry.
So this all happened in 1969.
Yeah, all the photos accompanying this are in black and white, and dudes who all the guys look like they were standing next to Jack Ruby when he got shot.
Right. Yeah. So I guess actually to set the stage for this, it's worth going back even a little farther. So the basis of all bribery law in Texas starts with the state constitution. There's actually a part of the state constitution that makes it illegal to accept bribes. And that came from the fact that back in ancient Rome, it used to be encouraged to give bribes to elected officials, and eventually people were like, that might be a problem. We might need to button that up.
I would argue in current day Rome, it's not super. I don't know if they've ever fully shaken it over there.
There was actually there was a recent political development. I say recent, like as recent as I'm going to hear about some new shit happening in Roman legal terms, but it was probably about the last 5 or 6 years they had like a referendum on the thing about specifically bribes or things like that, and essentially the argument was made like, hey, this is our culture. Our culture is that we come to you with a gift and you help us out because we gave you the gift, and they're like, you can't deny us our culture. And like somebody's like, what about people who have money to give gifts? And they were like, hey, forget about it. Essentially is what happened. Although Kath is Italian. I don't know why I felt like I needed to say that.
I'm allowed, where you're giving yourself we're allowed to say this.
Yeah. Some of my best friends are Kath.
Exactly. But anyway, so the bribery, the initial guidelines against bribery we draw from ancient Roman laws.
Right.
Is that what you're...
Yeah. And then that gets baked into the state constitution, and part of why the current constitution has such a detailed provision, and you got to take this with a grain of salt, but at least at the time they were saying that the Reconstruction government was very corrupt. Keep in mind, it's a bunch of people that own slaves that are saying that and don't.
They're like, man, these new guys are, they're really corrupt,
super corrupt.
Yeah, they don't want us owning people. The fucking nerve of these assholes.
And then
I saw this really good meme on the internet the other day. It was one of the ones of like somebody pushing a little tiny domino, and then it gets like bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And the tiny domino was U.S. Ending Reconstruction early, and the big domino was every problem in America. Like,
sounds that checks out
pretty much. But anyway, so that's where that comes from.
Yeah, and so the other thing they were griping about was apparently railroad lobbyists were really big at the time and constantly bothering them while they were doing the Constitutional Convention. Somebody went in and they were like, I hate these railroad lobbyists. Let's go ahead and write this in. So if you look at it, it's very detailed. It's kind of what you would expect. Pretty much any law that you're going to write in statute comes from whatever power came from the Constitution, right? So they'll give the big, broad rule, and then you have to fill in the gaps. That's how we got to this point where now we have all these new rules, because around 1969, they were like, hey, it's been working for almost 100 years. Then enter Frank Sharp. So the whole thing with Frank Sharp was that he was a Houston banker and insurance company manager. He ran this thing called Sharpstown State Bank and National Bankers Life Insurance Corporation. He'd been having issues with different state and federal regulators, which had been critical of loans that his bank was giving out. And because of that, he went to the Texas legislature and wanted them to pass a bill that would either allow him to get state banking insurance in lieu of whatever the FDIC was giving, or just as a supplemental thing to kind of help him get more insurance and be able to give out more risky loans. So I started digging into the court documents around this because if you look online, it's just not a super well recorded event.
Yeah.
But man, there's a lot in the court documents.
I love how in this one sentence, this has become the most deeply researched episode of this entire podcast.
It is like we're lazy and we use journalists' work that have already, with attribution, have already gone through court documents and stuff. But like, it is wild. It's come up on a lot of episodes lately. I'm rewatching The Wire right now, and like. One of the drug dealers, Marlowe, is like, he's like the smartest drug dealer. And the reason why is because he's the only one who goes down and gets the transcripts from hearings.
Yeah,
like, he's the only one who looks at what's actually in the court cases. So like, he like knows everything about his rival's drug organization because it's all in these court testimonies. Like, once it's in a trial, it's public record.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Anybody can access this stuff, but they're mostly boring, so people don't do it.
Yeah, boring.
So thank
and
you
also
for doing
kind
it.
of hard
As someone
to
who
find.
can read it.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Yeah, I need a plot like The Wire to read that thing. Like I can't like read a court document and be like, wait, so they were getting the drugs off the shipping container. I need a fictionalized plot to make that palatable for my brain.
Yeah.
They're
pretty dry.
Thousands and thousands of pages.
Well, and the other thing is like, it's just people talking. So like if you're watching a script, it's all cutting out the fat, and then you read somebody talking and you're like, oh man, where was I that day? It's brutal, especially in writing. So anyway, I dig into the court documents. What it ends up telling us is Sharp went to the Speaker of the House, this guy named Mutcher, and he tells him, I'm interested in getting this bill passed, and just keeps telling him about it. He's calling him, he's sending letters, all that kind of thing. Eventually, Mutcher, the Speaker of the House, goes down to Houston to meet with Sharp privately. And while they're meeting, he's just complaining to him about some personal financial losses he'd taken on a stock deal. Mutcher tells Sharp that he dwelt on these losses considerably. Sharp picks up on, what's going on here.
Yeah,
and
picking up
he's
what he's
like,
putting down.
"Oh, okay, I see what's going on. You might need some help. So
you might need some cheering up from those losses.
Yeah, exactly.
Financially.
So in his testimony, he says that Mutcher, as he's like finishing up the meeting, is like in a sort of, by the way, how's it going? What's going on with your insurance company? And he starts talking with him about that. And eventually he says, I think I might want to buy some stock in your insurance company. He's like, okay, I'm catching your drift. And he's like, also, to do that, I'm going to need some credit to be able to do that. And he's like, well, my bank might be able to give you that credit. And he's like, great. So he gives him a loan to buy insurance stocks from his bank, which already problematic.
I can't get into like the details of this business, but if I've ever approached a vendor and said, "Hey, I would like to facilitate your services," they go, "Oh yeah, we love that too." I will be needing a loan to do so. The book bag's getting zipped back up.
Yeah, a little bit different if it's the Speaker of the House coming and talking to you. So a few days later, they're talking on the phone. And he tells him not only does he want to go ahead and buy those stocks, but he has some associates that also want to buy some stocks. Turns out those associates are all other elected officials, right?
Lawmakers, yeah.
That's just who I hang out with. I can't fucking control that.
I just told them about this great tip I just got, this investment opportunity, like you do.
Exactly. And then as a cherry on top, he's like, also, could my dad buy some stock? He's like, all right, sure. So he calls over to the president of the bank, tells him what's going on, and tells him he wants to go ahead and approve these loans, even though all they submitted were like these super flimsy personal financial disclosures, not the kind of thing you're supposed to have if you're getting loans, right? He shockingly says that we're going to go ahead and do this, despite the fact that all the regulators are watching him for giving out shady loans. Like, that's the thing he's already
Right, I was going to say, that's the thing
for.
he's lobbying about.
Yeah,
to try to give out shitty loans.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they buy the stocks with the loans, and they decide, okay, we're going to go ahead and get these bills ready. So Sharp prepares the bills and delivers them over to one of Moocher's co-conspirators, a fellow legislator named Thomas Shannon. And this
I just want to say, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just can't stop thinking about doing the bribe as a form of the crime for which you are trying to do the bribe to cover it up is the worst way to do a bribe. It's like if you were trying to cover up a murder and you're like, I'll throw in another one for you. It's like you gotta pick another currency.
Yeah.
It can't be the same. Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt.
If you find yourself in your third murder to cover up the first murder, poor planning out the gate. Poor planning.
You know what's going to help me with these shady loans? Another shady loan.
Right. It's like when they're like, there's so much traffic. I know it'll fix it. Another lane on the highway.
Another lane. Yeah.
It doesn't.
I owe money to this guy named Peter, and I don't have it, but I know this guy named Paul, and he leaves his doors unlocked.
Right. So Sharp ends up giving these bills to Shannon. The thing with Shannon is that guy is apparently very well known for being an expert in insurance regulations, and so that gives him a lot of heft to try and pass these bills. He's in the committee that has jurisdiction over it, so he brings them through the committee, gets them passed out, and then the speaker recognizes him on the floor to actually pass the bills. They pass on September 9th of 1969. The speaker calls Sharp and tells him they've passed. And then the very next day, he calls him again and says, hey, I think I'm ready to sell those stocks that you sold to me.
Right.
So he's like, all right, I catch your drift. I'm going to figure out a way to gin up a market for these stocks. Because obviously nothing's happened to like increase the profitability of this insurance company since they bought stocks.
I would argue that the passing of the it's okay to write that law might raise their profits a little bit.
Yeah, there's an argument to be made there. I'm sure that in their minds, they're like, that's going to be the cover. You know? So what Sharp does is he realizes, well, I have this Jesuit priest, and the Jesuits have invested a ton of money into my bank. They have 20,000 shares in my bank. So they've told me previously that they want to sell those shares. What I'll do is get them to sell those shares so that I have all that money, and then I'll tell them to reinvest it into my insurance company. It's like, hey, I just got you about $1 million in profits on the last deal. How about you come over and try the insurance company? Little does Father Kinnelly know, they are actually buying the shares of these representatives to do the payoff, right? So on September 11th, 2 days after this bill gets passed, they end up selling the shares, which made them about $250,000. And if you convert that to today's value, that's like $2 million.
Yeah.
A lot of money.
Yeah, we have to do that a lot in these because we cover stuff from the past, scams. We have to always do like the conversion rate. And it's just like, it's always sad to be like, damn, that's how much, that's just, that's how much our economy's slipping. Like,
God, I wish I had $1 back in 1969.
Right? It's all you need.
Yeah.
It's funny that I'm sure the Jesuits are unwitting participants in this, but it's like, if you want to talk about a rich history of bribery, bring the Catholics into this.
Tracing all the way back to Rome.
Where this was born. Man, I saw
30 pieces of silver out the gate, dude.
I saw Conclave this weekend. It's awesome. Highly recommend.
Ooh.
It's a political thriller about picking the Pope.
I've seen the previews for that.
It's dope, dude.
Yeah.
There's a lot of intrigue and scandal and backroom dealings about Pope stuff.
Nice.
Awesome.
I've been primed for like diabolical Pope drama since The Young Pope on HBO.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you like The Young Pope, you'll like this.
Yeah, which a comedian friend of ours is like, hey, have you guys been following The Pope That Fucks? It's a great series.
The Pope That Fucks.
Oh, man.
Anyway.
All right, sorry,
That's all right.
You were like, hey, we'll be able to fill an hour? I was like, oh, trust me, we'll.
Oh, man. So the SEC ends up noticing, hey, we got some shady stock deals going on, right? They start digging into it. They realize what's going on. They end up indicting Frank Sharp and several other high-ranking government officials in 1971. By the middle of 1971, the whole thing had just been expanding and kind of touching on all the different elected officials because even if they weren't directly involved in the bribe, they were involved in passing the bill. And so the taint of this bribe just starts kind of spreading to everybody, including the speaker, the lieutenant governor, the governor, all the big three. I mean, they all go down. The thing is, in 1972, it was an election year. And so there was this massive sweep of all of the state government. Bunch of new people get voted in. Several people just quit. They were like, oh, yeah, this is not looking good. I'm going to go ahead and quit. Everybody else that ran lost their reelection. So it ended up being this huge sweep of new people that came in. And of course, this case is like very prominent in the press. And so they're running on this anti-corruption platform that ends up being massively popular with the voters. And when they get in, they're like, oh, yeah, I think I like that. So they end up working to get a bunch of new ethics laws passed. And as a result of that, that's actually why we have all the modern things that we have in Texas right now. So all of the disclosure laws, all the open records laws, that means you can actually ask the government, hey, I want these documents, and then you're entitled to get them. They have to have open meetings. So if an agency comes together to decide any kind of policy, they have to make that open to the public. You can't even go and like have a side conversation outside of the public eye and be like, hey, we're going to vote this way, right?
Yeah.
So everything has to be
that in and
open.
of itself is illegal.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to cut you up, but is this bill, is it heavily enforced these days? Or I had read that it's become relatively toothless.
Yeah. So it has become looser and looser over time.
Yeah.
And I think that'll all start to make a little more sense the more we dig into kind of the developments here. But